is part 1 ** of your story. ** title. My parents said my career was a joke until they needed a loan from me. Part 1. I never thought the day would come when my parents would sit across from me, eyes lowered, hands folded like schoolchildren awaiting discipline, asking for help from me. The same me they once mocked for chasing a hobby instead of a real job. And now here they were, in my office, surrounded by awards they never acknowledged, and walls lined with framed features they never read. But we're not there yet. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Callie Monroe, and when I graduated high school in Oak Hill, Missouri, I had one thing on my mind: art. Not the kind that hangs in galleries with red wine openings and critics murmuring in circles. I mean illustration, animation, digital character design. I wanted to build worlds. I wanted to tell stories with a pencil, a screen, and a stubborn kind of magic. My parents, Rick and Donna, called it a phase. You draw cartoons, my dad had said, standing in my childhood bedroom the day before I left for college in California. No one's going to pay you for cartoons, Cal. My mom nodded, arms crossed. You're going to end up back here in 2 years, working retail and regretting you didn't take that offer from Linden Business College. I didn't argue. I'd tried that before, and learned the hard way that logic doesn't work when people see the world through fear. Instead, I hugged them both tightly, promised I'd call, and boarded the flight to San Jose with nothing but my sketchbooks and a scholarship that barely scraped by. Those first years were brutal. I lived in a shoebox studio with a broken heater and shared walls so thin I could hear my neighbor's alarm clock every morning at 4:30. I survived off ramen and off-brand peanut butter. But I was drawing. Every day. Every hour I wasn't in class or working 3 part-time jobs. I was creating characters, learning 3D modeling, watching tutorials, and entering contests. Then came the rejection emails, one after another. Studios I dreamed of working for, small ad agencies. Even the local escape room turned me down, but I kept going. I uploaded my work to forums, to DeviantArt, to Instagram. I started a Patreon with 2 subscribers, my best friend from college, Anita, and some stranger named WolfDad420. Everything changed on a Tuesday. I remember it because my bus was late, and I was drenched from head to toe when I arrived at my shift at the grocery store. I was stocking cans when I got the notification. One of my fan art posts had gone viral. Like, really viral. 10,000 likes in an hour, then 20. By the end of the night, Netflix had commented. 2 weeks later, they offered me a contract to develop concept art for a new animated series. I cried in the produce aisle. From there, it spiraled beautifully. My art got noticed, my audience grew, I got hired by a game studio in Seattle. My salary quadrupled in 1 year. Then came speaking gigs, licensing offers, an art book deal. I built a small team, started my own design agency. Clients came to us from everywhere: France, New York, Tokyo. The little cartoonist from Missouri, making magic with her pen. But through it all, my parents never said congratulations. Not once. They didn't come to my book launch. They didn't respond to the framed magazine cover I mailed them. When I sent a plane ticket for Christmas, they told me they were too busy. Then, last month, I got the call. "Hi, honey," my mom said, voice tight. "Your dad and we need to talk. Can we visit you next weekend?" I nearly dropped my phone. They had never visited me in 8 years. Not once. Sure," I said slowly. "Everything okay? We'll talk in person." When they arrived, they acted like tourists. My dad walked through my house like he was browsing an open house, tapping walls, peeking into rooms. My mom kept adjusting the vases like she lived there. Finally, over coffee, they got to the point. "We're in trouble," my dad said. His voice cracked. I saw something behind his eyes I hadn't seen since I was a kid. Fear. They'd co-signed a business loan for a cousin who vanished. The bank was after them. The house I grew up in was days from foreclosure. Their savings were gone. Retirement? Never gonna happen now. And they needed $50,000. We figured, with how well you're doing. I stared at them. The silence was thick. "So now my cartoons are useful?" My mom flinched. My dad looked away. "We were wrong, okay?" she whispered. "But we're still your parents." I should have felt triumphant. vindicated. Instead, all I felt was exhaustion. "I'll think about it," I said. "Give me a week." But I already knew what I was going to do. I just wasn't going to do it the way they expected. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. Here is Trex Part 2, ** of your story. I didn't sleep much that week. My mind ran loops like a broken animation cycle. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Their regret, their shame, their pride cracked at the edges. But I also saw my own reflection. Not the version of me they remembered. Not the gangly teenager with ink-stained fingers in pipe dreams. This version had bills, employees, obligations. This version was a businesswoman, a boss, a mentor to a dozen young artists who saw something in me that my parents never had. So I called Anita. "You're not seriously considering it, are you?" she asked, her voice sharp even through the speakerphone. I was in my office, feet up on the desk, staring at the ceiling like it might offer divine advice. "I am, but not how they expect." She sighed. "Cal, they ignored you for years. You begged for validation. Now they want your money? That's transactional?" I offered. "Exploitative." She wasn't wrong. But I wasn't doing this for them, not entirely. I drafted a contract. It was clear, professional, and brutal. A loan agreement. Every clause airtight. Collateral listed. Payment schedule laid out. I even attached a consultant to walk them through it. If they wanted to treat me like a bank, I'd behave like one. When I handed it to them over lunch the following week, my dad went pale. My mom looked like I'd slapped her. "You want us to sign this?" she asked, voice shrill. "Yes," I said calmly, "or you can go to the bank." My father flipped to the last page. "This clause says if we miss more than 2 payments, you can repossess the house." "Correct." "That's ruthless. So is pretending your daughter doesn't exist until you need her." They didn't speak for a full minute. Then my dad signed. My mom followed, reluctantly. Their hands trembled. I notarized it myself. I wired the money the next day. The silence afterward was deafening. Days passed with no calls, no texts. But I didn't expect thanks. I expected respect. And that was starting to come, in strange ways. 3 weeks later, my mom tagged me on Facebook. First time in years. A photo of one of my murals in downtown Seattle with a caption, "Proud of our daughter Callie and her incredible talent." I didn't comment. Then came the phone calls. At first, awkward. My dad asked what a rendering pipeline was. My mom wanted to know if she could watch the Netflix show I worked on without an account. But I could hear it in their voices. The shift. They were trying, clumsily, belatedly. One evening, I walked through my studio, watching the team stay late to finish a client commission. The walls buzzed with creative energy. Laughs, music, passion. I felt something stir in my chest. I texted my mom. "Tosh me, **, I'm proud of me too." No reply. But the next morning, a box arrived at my door. Inside, my old sketchbooks, every one I'd ever filled from age 8 to 17. I thought they were long gone, tossed during one of my mom's seasonal closet purges. But here they were, dog-eared and messy and magical. Tucked inside the first one was a note. **, we didn't understand. We do now. Love, Mom and Dad." I sat on the floor for a long time, surrounded by a childhood I thought I had to erase to survive. But I hadn't erased it. I'd built on it. Then came the invite. "Callie, would you come speak at the Oak Hill High School Career Day?" I nearly laughed. "Me?" "Yes," the guidance counselor said, sounding unsure. "The students requested you specifically. Your art went viral again. That new game release? It's huge here." I agreed. Of course I did. Back in Oak Hill, the air smelled the same, dry pine and distant dust. The high school hadn't changed. Same green lockers. Same cracked floors. But the auditorium was full of new faces, wide-eyed kids who looked like me once. I stood at the podium, hands shaking, heart pounding. Then I began. I used to walk these halls, thinking my dreams didn't belong here. That art was a hobby, not a future. But I was wrong. And if you've got a fire inside you, a dream others don't get, you owe it to yourself to try. Not for them, for you. Applause thundered. Afterward, I saw my parents in the back row. They stood when I walked off stage. My dad pulled me into a hug. My mom whispered, I was wrong about everything. I didn't reply, I just held them. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. Later that night, as I sat in my childhood bedroom, now a guest room, I opened one of my old sketchbooks. On the last page, in my handwriting, a note. Asterisk. One day they'll see. I smiled. They had. And maybe, just maybe, they always wanted to. They just didn't know how. But now? I didn't stay in Oak Hill long. After the speech and the awkward dinner that followed, my parents trying too hard, me trying not to flinch when they brought up childhood stories with the edges sanded off, I boarded the early morning flight back to Seattle. I sat by the window, earbuds in, watching the horizon bleed into gold. There was a new message on my phone from Anita. Turquoise asterisk. Asterisk. How did it go? Did they cry? Did you cry? Top hat, me, asterisk. Asterisk. Maybe. A little. And maybe. A lot. Top hat, Anita, asterisk. Asterisk. You're still a softie. Top asterisk. Asterisk. And you're still a cynic. But truthfully, I felt light. Not fixed. Not healed. But lighter, like I'd finally laid down a burden I didn't know I was still carrying. When I returned to the office, the team had covered my door in sticky notes. Each one had a little drawing or, quote, Queen of Pixels, Return of the Jedi but cooler, Callie, the boss baddie. I laughed so hard I choked on my coffee. Inside, my desk was piled with prototypes from our latest pitch to a French game studio. Characters I'd helped concept, now living and breathing in vibrant sketches, animations, and 3D sculpts. My world was humming again. But something was different. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't trying to prove myself. Not to them, not to anyone. That following week, I received a letter from Oak Hill High, a thank you note from the students who attended the talk. Most of them included doodles or scribbled lines of gratitude, but one stood out. Asterisk. Hi, Ms. Monroe. I didn't know artists could be powerful. I think I want to be one now, thank you. Katie, age 16. I pinned it next to my monitor. Not the awards, not the magazine cover, that letter. That same day, my dad called. Hey, kiddo, he said, like it was normal for him to do that. Hey, I answered, wary but calm. I was wondering. I know I owe you a lot, but do you think you could help me with something? I braced. What kind of something? Well, he cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. There's this veterans nonprofit trying to build an app to help older folks with therapy through storytelling. They want it to feel like a video game, sort of. I told them about you. They'd love to talk. I blinked. It was the last thing I expected. Not a favor for him. A bridge through him. Sure, I said slowly. I can talk to them. That meeting turned into a partnership, then a mini project, then a case study. My team was thrilled. It aligned with our values. It gave my junior animators a passion project to sink into. And me? I got to work on something that felt like healing. The next few months were a whirlwind. We hired 3 new artists. One of them, Danny, reminded me so much of myself at 22. Wide-eyed, intense, eager to please. I took her under my wing. Don't try to be impressive, I told her during her first week. Just be consistent. People confuse loud with brilliant. You don't have to shout to be heard. She nodded like I'd handed her the secrets of the universe. Around that same time, I decided to take a risk. A Tom or Big one. I'd been working under contracts for years. Studio commissions, licensing deals, ghost design work. I was known in the industry, respected, but I hadn't built something that was tree mined from the ground up. Until I did. The game idea came to me in fragments. A narrative puzzle adventure featuring a young girl who navigates a surreal, broken world. using memories as tools. Emotion-powered mechanics. Dreamlike art. A story of estrangement, forgiveness, and choice. It was, in a way, my story. But everyone's too. We pitched it to investors. They said no. All of them. Too niche. Too emotional. Female-driven games don't scale. That last one nearly made me flip the conference table. So I bootstrapped it. I poured in my savings. I offered profit shares to my team. We worked late nights, weekends. I watched the art grow from thumbnails to environments to full-fledged levels. I cried the first time I saw the protagonist blink. And then, one night, while I was reviewing audio layers, I got an email from an influencer. They'd played our demo. "This is the most beautiful thing I've touched all year," the email read. "I want to stream it to my 9 million followers. When's the launch?" I stared at the screen, heart pounding. We launched 3 months later. Within 48 hours, the game hit the top charts on Steam. By week's end, we were trending globally. And the letters started again, from fans, from other indie developers, from parents, from people like Katie. Then came the call. "Ms. Monroe, this is Samantha Lowe from the Game Developers Guild. You've been nominated for Developer of the Year." I laughed so hard, I had to sit down. I called Anita first. "What did I tell you?" she cackled. "Softy my ass, you're a storm." My parents sent flowers. Then a card. Then a message I never thought I'd hear. "Callie, we want to come to the ceremony. If you'll have us." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want them there, but because I wasn't sure who I wanted them to be there. In the end, I said yes. They arrived in Seattle in formal wear that didn't quite fit, and expressions that flickered between pride and awe. My dad cried when my name was called. My mom clapped so hard her hands turned red. Afterward, during dinner with the team, I introduced them as my parents, who once thought art was a phase. They laughed, sheepishly. And my mom raised a glass. "To phases," she said, "and to being wrong." The table erupted. I looked around. My team, my family. My past and present colliding in a room full of candles and champagne. I still carried the scars of their dismissal. But scars weren't weaknesses. They were proof I survived. And now, I was thriving. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because success is not a mountain you climb once. It's a rhythm you keep playing. And I was just getting started. Got it. Since the Canvas tool is disabled for now, I'll continue delivering the story directly here in text. The Monday after the awards ceremony, I found myself standing alone in the office kitchen, staring at the espresso machine as it hissed like a dragon. The building was quiet, still humming from the weekend's buzz. I hadn't slept much, and it wasn't from nerves. It was adrenaline. My life had shifted again, tectonically, and I felt it in my bones. That morning, Danny burst in with a grin that practically glowed. "You're in Forbes, Callie. Their quote, 30 creators to watch under 35 feet list. You're number 1. I nearly dropped my coffee. "No way." "Yes way, it's already trending." And, she hesitated, then added, "Your quote's at the top." I grabbed her phone, heart skipping. There it was. Asterisk. Build what heals you. Someone out there needs it too. Callie Monroe, game designer and founder. Monroe Inc. It felt surreal. Like I'd walked through fire, and now people were calling the ashes beautiful. But even as the recognition poured in, interviews, articles, keynote invites, I felt this strange hollowness tugging at me, a restlessness I couldn't name. Like I had more to prove, but not to the world. To myself. That same week, I was invited to speak at a European tech conference in Lisbon. I accepted. On the flight over, I packed more than just slides and talking points. I packed questions. Questions like, what did I really want now? Was I still building for love or just momentum? And more dangerously, was I happy? The conference was electric. Hundreds of indie creators, devs, animators, writers, all gathered under vaulted glass ceilings to swap war stories and ideas. My keynote landed harder than I expected. When I stepped off stage, a line of attendees waited to speak to me, some with notebooks, some with tears in their eyes. One woman, maybe mid-40s, said, "You helped me remember why I started drawing. I quit for 20 years. I'm going back now." That stuck with me. After the conference, I stayed in Portugal a few extra days, walked the cobbled streets alone, ate pastries in tiny cafes where no one knew me. I watched street artists paint murals in silence. Their movements were poetry, no audience, just creation. And I realized something painful. I hadn't drawn for myself in over a year. Every sketch, every design, every project, even the beautiful ones, had been for clients, fans, markets, deadlines. Not for me such. So I bought a cheap sketch pad from a corner shop, found a rooftop with a view of the ocean, and I drew. Badly. Messy lines, no structure, just instinct. It felt like breathing after being underwater too long. I stayed up there until the sun set, and the rooftops glowed orange. When I returned to Seattle, I made a change. I blocked off one full day a week for unpaid art. No meetings, no approvals, just me and a blank canvas. At first, my team thought I was joking. But then it caught on. Suddenly, Fridays became sacred. Everyone joined in. Creative Fridays, we called them. It changed our culture. Work got better, people got braver, and somehow, our revenue went top. Around this time, my parents invited me to visit Oak Hill again. My instinct was to say no, not out of spite, just emotional muscle memory. But I surprised myself. "Okay," I told them. "But this time, I'm bringing someone." Anita nearly choked when I invited her. "You want me to come to Missouri? With cows? And your reformed parents?" "Yes," I laughed. "You've earned a front row seat to the redemption arc." We flew in on a Thursday. My parents had redecorated. Their house looked brighter somehow, less heavy. On the mantel sat a framed screenshot from my game, signed by me. I stared at it in shock. "You put this here?" I asked my mom. She nodded, suddenly shy. "We show everyone who visits." That night, over dinner, my dad asked Anita about her job. My mom asked me what kind of soup the characters in my game eat. It was weird, but good weird. After dessert, my dad handed me an envelope. "It's the first payment," he said softly. "On the loan. We're doing monthly like you said." I opened it. Inside was a check and a sticky note. Asterisk. "Thank you for believing in your future, even when we didn't." I teared up. "I didn't do it for a told you so," I whispered. "I know," he said, "but we needed to say it anyway." That night, in my old room, now a craft room, I found a box under the bed. Inside, newspaper clippings, printouts, screenshots. All about me. They'd been collecting them. I sat on the carpet for hours, flipping through years of quiet pride they never knew how to show. And in that moment, something clicked. They hadn't changed overnight, neither had I. But we were finally meeting in the middle. Not because they suddenly understood my world, but because they chose to try. And that mattered more than any award. I returned to Seattle with a heart that felt heavier, but in a good way, like it had grown roots. That trip home hadn't erased anything, but it rewrote a few sentences in the story I'd been telling myself for years. My parents weren't perfect. Neither was I. But maybe healing wasn't a finish line. Maybe it was just showing up over and over again, even when the script had already been written in stone. Back at Monroe Inc., things were moving fast. Our game had passed 2 million downloads. Indie dev forums were calling it the first emotional adventure that actually earned its tears. A major publisher reached out about distribution rights. I politely declined. We weren't done. We were already building the sequel. But something else was stirring beneath the surface. One morning, while reviewing new animation cycles, Danny came into my office with eyes wide. "There's a man here," she whispered. "Says he's from the mayor's office in Seattle." I blinked. "Send him in?" He entered with a briefcase and a nervous smile. 30 minutes later, he left me with a proposal. The city wanted to commission an interactive art installation based on my game, in the heart of downtown. "We think your message, your voice, could be something this city needs right now," he said. My palms were sweating. I nodded, trying not to look completely unqualified. That night, I sat on my balcony and stared at the skyline. I thought about my parents. About every person who'd ever told me I was dreaming too loud. About Katie, the girl from Oak Hill. About Danny. And I said yes. The next 4 months were chaos. Beautiful chaos. We partnered with engineers, sound designers, even a scent artist who wanted the space to smell like the dream world from our game. There were virtual elements, projection mapping, audio reactive walls, an AR scavenger hunt. The whole thing pulsed with color, emotion, memory. The opening night came faster than expected. The line stretched around the block. Kids, artists, gamers, old people who'd never touched a joystick in their lives, they all showed up. And at the center of it all, my parents, holding hands, wearing matching Monroe Inc. hoodies that Danny had secretly mailed them. When the crowd parted, my dad walked into the exhibit like it was a cathedral. This is you," he whispered. I nodded. But before I could say anything, a voice behind me shouted, "Hey, Callie! My daughter's in game design school because of you!" I turned. It was a woman from Lisbon, the one who'd cried after my keynote. And then another voice, and another. The room was filling with people who weren't just there to see something. They were there because they'd changed because of it. And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just about proving I could make art that mattered. It was about building a space where other people believed they could too. Midway through the night, Danny stood beside me and handed me her phone. "You need to see this," she said. It was a live stream. A major gaming platform had just announced our studio as the winner of the Time Triton Creators Innovation Grant, a 6-figure prize, a feature spot at next year's GDC. I gasped. Anita called seconds later. "You better buy champagne. I don't care if it's 2 a.m. You called try 2 hours this." I laughed until I cried. Right then, in the middle of all the lights and cheers, I took a breath. And I remembered something important. Chaitzen Sabav im Song, times asterisk. This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story. Topten Song, Chaitzen Sav im Song. Mao. After the event, things didn't slow down. They accelerated. Our team doubled in size. We expanded to a second studio space, smaller, more intimate, for deep focus projects. We called it The Nest, a place for creators to build ideas too fragile for boardrooms. I began mentoring young women in tech, not because I was asked, but because I needed trees to. Because if one Callie could exist in a Missouri basement with a sketchpad and survive this world, then 100 more were out there, scared and talented and unsure. The mentorships gave me life. But with growth came pressure. More employees meant more people relying on me, more eyes on our decisions, more opinions. I hired a COO, Rachel, a powerhouse in boots and brain cells. She streamlined operations, protected my calendar, gave me breathing room to creates again. And yet, the pressure still found ways in. That year, we launched our second title, Threadwalkers, a narrative-driven co-op game about 2 sisters trapped in a world stitched from memory and dreams. It was darker, bolder, more ambitious. Reviews exploded, good and bad. Some people called it genius, others called it pretentious. But no one ignored it, which, in our world, meant we'd done something right. I spent nights debugging code and early mornings replying to fan emails from teenagers who saw themselves in the sisters. Kids who'd never seen trauma told gently, who thanked us for not making the pain pretty but still making it survivable. One message read, I played this with my brother. We cried. We're talking again. Thank you. That message floored me. My voice, once mocked by the two people who gave it to me, was now helping people speak to each other. And here's the wildest part. My mom had started drawing. I found out through Instagram. She'd made a private account and posted shaky watercolor landscapes. A mountain, a tree, a little bird with cartoon eyes. I didn't comment. I just watched. Then one day, she sent me a photo. It was a sketch of me. At my desk, hair piled up, pen in hand, focused. Asterisk, trying to understand your world. Red heart. Asterisk, the caption read. I cried for an hour. Because that was healing too. Not always the words, but the effort, the brushstroke, the trying. So I called her. Mom, I said, you're an artist. There was a pause. No, she whispered, but I raised one. I didn't think it could get more surreal than watching my mom learn to draw at 62. But life has a strange way of folding surprises into every chapter, like origami tucked into the spine of a book you thought you already finished. By spring, Monroe Inc. was no longer a quirky indie studio operating out of a repurposed loft in downtown Seattle. We'd become a cultural conversation. Our art was being taught in design classes. Fan theories about our characters lived on Reddit threads. People were tattooing quotes from our games onto their ribs, their arms, their backs. But what meant more than all that? My team had become a family. Every Friday, after creative hours, we'd gather in the common space, an open area filled with beanbags, giant sketch pads, and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the sound. Sometimes we'd critique each other's work, sometimes we'd just talk. That's when Danny opened up. We were eating cheap takeout, shoes off, curled up like kids at a sleepover, when she said softly, I never told you this, but your first game saved my life. I paused, chopsticks midair. I was in a dark place back then, dropped out of art school, moved back in with my mom, thought maybe the world didn't need what I had to give, then I played Salt Light, and I saw myself. My heart cracked open. You saved your life, I said gently. I just gave you a flashlight. Donnie smiled, teary-eyed. Still, thank you. That moment cemented something in me. It wasn't about fame, or even legacy. It was about making space. Space for people to feel seen, to breathe, to try again. Around that time, I was invited to guest lecture at CalArts. Returning there felt like time travel. The hall still smelled like paint and ambition. I stood in front of a class of trembling, hopeful faces and said the words I once needed to hear. You don't have to wait for permission. Art is valid, because it's yours. Afterward, a young man with purple hair approached me. My parents say I'm wasting my time here, he admitted. They wanted me to go into accounting. I smiled. Mine told me cartoons weren't real jobs, I said. Now they wear hoodies with my studio's logo. He laughed. I gave him my card. Email me if you ever need someone to remind you you're not crazy. When I got back to Seattle, a package was waiting for me. It was from my dad. Inside, a leather-bound journal, old and a little cracked. On the first page, in his neat handwriting, asterisk, your grandfather's. He drew too. Thought you might want this. My breath caught. I had never known that. No one had ever said a word. Flipping through it, I saw pencil sketches. Trains, trees, faces, delicate and alive. I felt like I was shaking hands with a ghost I hadn't even realized was part of my story. So I called my dad. Why didn't you tell me he was an artist? He cleared his throat. Didn't think it mattered. He never pursued it, worked construction, said it was a kid's game. I was silent for a long time. But he drew until he died, my dad added, kept this journal in his toolbox. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thank you, I whispered. It was the closest I'd ever heard my dad admit regret. And it mattered. That summer, I was invited to curate a small gallery exhibition, Games as Art. The idea was to display stills, sketches, and environments from interactive media as if they were paintings. I said yes instantly. But I didn't stop there. I included one of my grandfather's sketches. No title, no description, just a drawing of a boy under a tree. It stopped people in their tracks. One woman asked, "Is this from a deleted level?" I shook my head. No, this is the beginning of my story. When I told my parents, they cried. My mom flew in just for opening night. She stood by the sketch, wiping tears, telling strangers, "That was my father-in-law, and that's my daughter." I had to walk away to keep from crying. But not all surprises are good ones. A few weeks later, I got a call from my accountant. "Callie, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. Turns out a licensing partner we'd signed with 2 years ago had folded. Quietly, illegally. They'd been misreporting royalties, skimming off the top, and the audit revealed it had cost us over $300,000. My hands went cold. What does this mean? It means we need to freeze hiring, delay the next project, maybe even cut travel or marketing. I hung up and stared out the window. The skyline blurred. My heartbeat felt like a war drum. Not because of the money, but because I now had Torres Naros depending on me. I couldn't let this take us down. So I did what I always did. I created. I stayed up 3 nights in a row drafting a new pitch, an immersive mini-game designed for mental health organizations, built for schools, therapy offices, clinics. Short, gentle, art-heavy, impactful. I showed it to my team. They rallied. Danny built the prototype in 2 weeks. Our composer layered in ambient soundscapes. Our writer cried when she tested the first level. We pitched it to a non-profit alliance. They funded us in full. And just like that, we were back on track. Better even. Because it reminded me again that creation is not just a shield, it's a sword. And I wasn't done fighting for the space we'd carved out in this noisy world. Here is part 7 * of your story. The tide had turned again. We had weathered the storm, but it left a crack in the foundation I didn't want to ignore. I'd always run the studio like a dreamer. Big vision, open doors, all heart. But dreams needed walls, too. Structures strong enough to hold the weight of everything they inspired. So I made a decision that shocked even Anita. "I'm hiring a financial strategist," I said over coffee one afternoon. "You?" She blinked. "The girl who used to track her budget on the back of napkins?" "Exactly why I'm hiring one," I grinned. That's when I met Jordan, meticulous, even-keeled, wore sweaters like armor, and asked me questions no one ever had. "What does sustainability look like to you, Callie?" I blinked. "Sustainability? You built an empire on passion. But how do you protect it from burning out? What's the 5-year plan? What's the 20? I didn't have answers. But I wanted them. So we worked late nights mapping revenue trees, restructuring royalties, trimming partnerships that looked good on paper but drained our team emotionally. We turned Monroe Inc. from a miracle into a model. And still, every Friday I drew. Unpaid, unfiltered, free. One of those sketches became something more. It started as a doodle, a girl and her shadow walking in opposite directions. Donnie saw it and stopped mid-step. "That's it," she whispered. "That's the next game." I laughed. "It's just a sketch." "No," she said, eyes wide. "It's a knocker mirror." We called it *Splitlight. A 2-perspective puzzle game where the player switches between a protagonist and her subconscious, a literal shadow who sees the world differently. One builds, one breaks. They have to work together to find the truth. It was bold, abstract, weird. And it felt like me. We pitched it to no one. Instead, we crowdfunded it. Within 24 hours, we hit 150% of our goal. By the end of the week, 300%. Players believed in us. They weren't just consumers, they were co-dreamers. Development began, and it poured out of us. Every line of code, every piece of music, every voice recording, it all hummed with something electric. We were doing more than making a game. We were telling the truth, in metaphor and movement. Around this time, my dad called out of the blue. "You got a minute?" he asked, voice softer than I'd heard it in months. "Sure." I started going to group, he said. I froze. Group? Veterans support. Thought it was just guys sitting around, but last week they talked about art therapy. I told them about you. My heart caught in my throat. You did? He chuckled. Might have bragged. A little. That moment, it meant more than 1,000 loan repayments. Because pride is quiet sometimes. But when it's honest, it echoes. Later that week, a letter arrived. Handwritten, from a woman named Ruth, age 73. Asterisk, your father spoke about your studio today, said he finally understood why beauty matters. I just wanted to say thank you for giving him back a part of himself he'd buried. I pressed that note to my chest and cried. Because every pencil stroke I'd drawn in secret, every rejection letter, every sleepless night in a cold dorm room, it had led to this. To someone's father rediscovering hope. We pushed forward on Asterisk Splitlight, and as it neared beta release, I got an idea. A big one. I want to open a gallery, I told my team. Not just for us, for everyone. They stared. A physical space? Rachel asked. Yes, for digital artists. Game concept art, fan work, experimental stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else. A space where gamers, designers, and dreamers walk in and asterisks see themselves on the walls. Silence. Then Donnie stood up. I'll help build it. And just like that, we began. I called it Saul Lightwell. The building was an old printing press warehouse in Fremont. Brick bones, massive windows, and enough dust to fill a small planet. But I saw the potential. We hosted a local showcase first, invited artists from marginalized communities to submit work. We offered stipends, no submission fees, and we let them tell their stories. Opening night, the line curled around the block. Kids in cosplay, old painters with trembling hands, parents holding their children's fingers and pointing to digital canvases that pulsed with color. And right in the center, a framed drawing, the Shadow Girl and the Builder Girl, holding hands. I stood beside it and watched strangers cry. That night, as I locked up, Anita leaned against the wall and said, "You built a church for the weird kids." I smiled. "No," I whispered. "I built a mirror. They brought the light." I didn't know it at the time, but the moment we opened the doors to Asterisk Lightwell, the gallery, we'd done something bigger than curating art. We'd created a lighthouse, a place for people who'd spent their whole lives swimming against current, misunderstood, underestimated, or told, like I once had been, this isn't a real job. Now they had a place to stand and shine. The following weeks blurred. Press came in waves, tech blogs, art blogs, indie outlets. Even a national morning show reached out to feature the gallery and our game, Splitlight. We did a joint segment, 10 minutes on legacy, intergenerational healing, and the way video games could become therapy. My mom called me after it aired. "You looked powerful," she said softly, "like you belonged there." I think that was the first time she didn't sound surprised by my success, just proud. By then, Try Splitlight Asterisk was in its final month of development. We were deep in polish, tightening animations, smoothing transitions, refining the emotional beats of every scene. I was personally overseeing the final dream sequence level, a scene where the shadow character walks through a hallway of forgotten childhoods. It was raw, vulnerable. It almost felt like therapy just building it. But something unexpected happened that week. We got an email. Subject line, urgent legal notice, use of inherited artwork. It was from a lawyer, a distant cousin of my grandfather, someone none of us had ever met. She claimed that the sketch we'd used in our gallery, the one my dad had given me, drawn by my grandfather, was protected property of her family branch. She wanted it removed, or we'd face a cease and desist. My blood ran cold. We weren't selling it, we weren't profiting from it, but the claim was technical, legal, and very real. I brought it to Rachel. She handled it calmly, efficiently. We offered to add proper credit, offered to license it, offered to take it down if absolutely necessary. Still, something in me twisted. This wasn't just about a sketch. It was about legacy, memory, control. And it made me think, how much of what we build do we actually own? How much of our history belongs to us? How much of our voice is still waiting for permission? Late that night, I sat at my desk, alone in the darkened office. I pulled out my grandfather's journal, turned to the last page, empty. I drew something. It wasn't for a client, or a game, or a gallery. Just for me. A woman standing in the middle of two versions of herself, the girl who doubted everything, and the creator who knew exactly what she was building. In the morning, I posted it online. No caption, no tags. It went viral in 6 hours. That sketch became the loading screen for *Splitlight. And somehow, the cease and desist never escalated. Maybe they realized they were fighting the wrong battle. Maybe they saw the whole picture. Or maybe, just maybe, art had spoken louder than law. The day we released *Splitlight* was gray and rainy. Perfect, somehow. The kind of weather that made people stay inside with headphones and explore quiet, emotional worlds. And explore they did. The game broke records. User reviews poured in. Stories from teens who'd never had the words for their anxiety until they played. From veterans. From foster kids. From teachers who were using it in classrooms to help children open up. One woman wrote, "My daughter played this after we lost her father. We sat in silence. Then she turned to me and said, 'Mommy, do you think Daddy is her shadow? Thank you for giving us a place to feel together.'" I read it aloud to the team during a Monday check-in. Nobody spoke for a full minute. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. The ripple of impact wasn't just visible now, it was roaring. We were invited to a panel at the Game Developers Conference. I brought Danny and 2 of our newer designers, people who'd grown through the chaos and magic we'd built together. When we arrived, the badge attendant looked up, saw my name, and said, "Oh, you're her." It wasn't surprise. It was recognition. And that hit different. That night, after the panel, we all went out for drinks. For the first time in a long time, I let go. I laughed until my sides ached. I danced. I let the joy settle into my bones, unfiltered. Back at the hotel, I FaceTimed my dad. "I think we did it," I said. He raised a glass of water and smiled. "No, Callie, you did." Before he hung up, he added, "Your grandfather would have lost his mind over all this." That stuck with me. Because for years, I thought I was the first link in the chain. But I wasn't. I was the one who finally said, "What if we don't break this time?" We launched *Splitlight* on console 2 weeks later. Sales exploded. Our publisher called with interest in physical art books and even a limited animated short based on the game's story. I approved it all. But I made one rule. All profits from the animated short would go into a new fund, one built for young digital artists from rural communities. Kids like me. We called it the Samia Monroe Mirror Grant. The first recipient was a girl from Oak Hill. I saw her application and wept. She'd included a photo of my high school auditorium, my name still on the alumni wall. Her essay ended with, "If Callie Monroe came from where I come from, then maybe I can go where she's gone too." The circle was closing. But not ending. Because stories like mine don't finish. They echo. They ripple. And they carry others forward. The grant had been my idea. But what happened next? That was hers. Her name was Ivy, 17, homeschooled. Small town in Iowa, where the biggest building was the grain elevator, and the fastest internet had been installed 3 months prior. Her digital portfolio came in the form of stitched-together JPEGs attached to an email with no subject line and the sentence, "I didn't know if I was allowed to dream until I saw someone like me who did." I don't know what it was. Maybe the crooked way she drew facial expressions, or the heartbreak in her color palettes. But I saw her potential instantly. I flew her out to Seattle. I didn't tell the team. When Ivy walked into Monroe Inc.'s headquarters, shoulders hunched, Hoodie sleeves chewed at the edges, no one batted an eye. Danny took her under her wing. Our animators gave her space. I gave her the back room and said, "Make something. Anything. No rules." 3 weeks later, she showed me a storyboard sequence that made me cry in my car for 10 minutes. That girl didn't need a scholarship. She needed a platform. Ivy became our youngest apprentice ever, and she was just the beginning. Within months, the Monroe Mirror Grant went viral. We had 500 applications. Then 1,000. I brought in partners, hired a full-time outreach director, started speaking at rural schools. Suddenly, the girl who once got laughed at for drawing in notebooks during math class was building a pipeline for talent no one had thought to look for. But with scale came weight. I began to feel it in my chest, that tightness, that quiet whisper that said, "You're carrying too much." And then it hit. I crashed. Not publicly, not dramatically, but silently. I stopped answering emails. I postponed meetings. I started sleeping 12 hours a day and still waking up tired. My sketchbook stayed closed. I looked at blank pages and felt nothing. Anita noticed first. "You okay?" she asked during a call. Her voice wasn't teasing for once. "I think I'm tired," I said. She was quiet for a beat. "Then take a break. The world won't end." But the world had revolved around me for so long. The decisions, the studio, the deadlines, the weight of dreams. I didn't know how to set it down. That night, I went for a walk along the water. The Seattle wind whipped at my face. My hoodie wasn't warm enough, and my thoughts were too loud. I stood at the edge of the pier and whispered, "I'm misliking this." I didn't know someone else had heard me. It was Ivy. She'd followed me out, quiet as always. She stood beside me and said, "You told me once that building something doesn't mean breaking yourself." I looked at her. She didn't look like a kid anymore. "I did," I whispered. "So why are you breaking now?" I didn't have an answer. Ivy reached into her bag and handed me something. A drawing. It was me, not on stage, not in interviews. Just sitting on the floor in a hoodie, sipping tea, watching the rain. My face was calm, safe, loved. "You look like this when you're not trying so hard," she said. And just like that, I cried. I took 2 months off. Fully. Rachel took over studio operations. Donnie handled art direction. The team carried the weight beautifully. They even sent me care packages. Doodles, photos, playlists, homemade candles. I went home. Not to Seattle, not to Oak Hill, but to nowhere. A small cabin in Oregon I'd booked without telling anyone. Just me, a fireplace, and a pile of blank sketchbooks. I didn't draw for 3 weeks. Then one morning, while sipping coffee, I sketched a fox. No meaning, no metaphor, just a fox. It was lopsided. Weird. And I loved it. I filled 20 pages that day. I returned to Seattle on the first day of spring. The team greeted me with a banner that read, "Tomes Asterisk. Welcome back, Boss Batty. Asterisk." I laughed until I cried. Then I called a meeting. "Things are changing," I told them. "We're building something new, not just games, not just art, a creative sanctuary, a place people come to heal, to grow, to find their voices. That's our new mission." No one questioned it, because they were already living it. Over the next few months, we expanded again, not in size, in depth. We created residencies, mini grants, therapy stipends for the team, a mentorship series led by industry legends. We partnered with nonprofits, built programs for incarcerated youth to learn digital design. And slowly, my love returned. The spark wasn't a flame anymore. It was a steady fire, built on logs I'd learned to stack carefully. I drew again. Not to prove anything, just to be. One night, my mom sent me a photo. It was her first painting, a watercolor of her childhood home. The caption read, "Asterisk, I forgave myself today for never trying. Thank you for showing me how." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, Night asterisk. I forgive you too. Asterisk. Because I did. Because maybe all of this, the games, the studio, the pain, maybe it hadn't just been about proving them wrong. Maybe it had been about understanding why they hadn't believed in the first place, and forgiving that, so I could finally, truly be free. I didn't know forgiveness could feel like this. Quiet. Not cinematic. Not a grand crescendo with swelling strings and a weepy montage. Just quiet. Like walking into a room and realizing the hum you'd lived with for years is finally gone. That's what peace felt like. But peace doesn't mean stillness. Especially not when the world keeps moving. By the time we crossed the 5-year mark at Monroe Inc., our footprint had grown from a studio into a constellation. We had partnerships with mental health orgs, public schools, streaming platforms, and even a global learning initiative that used gamified art therapy for trauma recovery in war-affected regions. Our games were being studied in academic papers. I was asked to speak at Oxford. But all of it, the accolades, the press, the expansion, meant little compared to one message I received on a Wednesday morning from someone I never expected to hear from. My old high school art teacher, Mrs. Lansbury. I hadn't seen her since graduation. The email was short. Asterisk. Dear Callie, I retired last spring. You were the last student I ever taught who truly reminded me what art was for. Thank you for never letting the world convince you to shrink. You're why I kept teaching until the end. I stared at the screen for a long time. I remembered sitting in the back row of her classroom, sketching while the other kids scrolled on their phones. She used to slip me books under the desk, whisper things like, asterisk, keep this for when you feel alone. She had been the first to believe in me, and the last adult who'd made me feel seen before I left Missouri. I wrote back immediately. Asterisk, you gave me a home before I knew how to build one. Later that week, I got a call from a documentary producer. They were doing a series on modern creators who had changed how people thought about digital spaces. They wanted to feature me. At first, I hesitated. I was tired of being a symbol. But then I remembered all the times I had sat in silence, wishing someone like me had been visible when I needed her. So I said yes. Filming started the next month. They followed me through the studio, through the halls of Lightwell, through my weekly sketch session with Ivy, who is now running our junior mentorships. They interviewed my team, my parents, even Anita, who threatened to throw a cup at the camera if they made her cry. They asked me about my lowest moment. I told them the truth. The hardest part wasn't being ignored, I said. It was believing I had to earn love by achieving, that I had to become impressive enough for people to stay. They asked me what changed. I looked into the lens and whispered, I did. The documentary aired 3 months later. The day it released, my inbox exploded. Messages from old classmates, former professors, strangers, kids, parents. And one from someone I never expected, Wolfdad 420, the Patreon supporter from my earliest days. Turns out, his real name was Jacob, a retired software engineer in Nebraska. His message read, asterisk, you were the first creator I ever backed. I knew you were going to do something special. I'm proud of you, Callie. Thanks for letting an old man believe in dreams again. I cried reading that. Because sometimes the world is terrible, but sometimes it remembers. And when it does, it makes the remembering beautiful. That same week, my dad sent me a photo of himself painting. I nearly dropped my phone. He'd signed up for a community class, painted a still life of fruit that looked vaguely alien, but he was grinning ear to ear. Think I'm gonna hang this next to your sketch, he texted. We'll have a family wall. I sent him a selfie of me giving a thumbs up, eyes full of tears. He responded, asterisk, maybe being a Monroe means something different now. Yes it did. Meanwhile, Monroe Inc. had been quietly working on our biggest project yet. Not a game, a platform. We called it Naipo Different Enbra, Tritwarzayan Different Emotions Bothera, and Trizayan Different Ends Bothera Emotional Resilience. a hybrid tool for therapists, educators, and creators. A cross between a design suite, a storytelling engine, and a mental wellness guide. We'd built it from scratch. It allowed users, young, old, trained, or raw, to build interactive stories that help them process grief, trauma, confusion, fear. It came with avatars, worlds, music libraries, voice prompts. We beta tested it in 4 school districts. The feedback was overwhelming. A 6th grader used it to explain to his class what it felt like when his mom forgot him at pickup every day. A teenager in a juvenile facility used it to apologize to his younger self. A veteran used it to make a narrative where he hugged the friend he'd lost. The stories were messy, beautiful, necessary. I stood in front of my team after our launch and said, "This might be the most important thing we'll ever make." No one disagreed. That night, I went home, curled up on the couch with a sketch pad, and drew something new. A girl sitting in the center of a campfire circle, surrounded by shadows. But they weren't scary. They were listening. And she was finally speaking. I posted it online with no caption. Ivy commented first. "I know who she is. She's us." Anita commented next. "You've always been her." And somewhere, I think, that little version of me from Oak Hill smiled. Because she finally had a seat at her own fire. And she wasn't alone anymore. Mine teat. I always thought the end of the story would feel like a curtain dropping. A final applause, fade to black. But instead, it feels like an open window. Like a breeze carrying new voices into the room, reminding you that stories don't end when you finish telling them. They echo. They seed other stories. They spark beginnings. That's what Ember became. Not a product. A beginning. Within a year, the platform had reached 12 countries, translated into 9 languages. It was being used in schools, refugee camps, prisons, rehab centers. It wasn't just a storytelling tool. It was becoming a lifeline. We received letters that didn't sound like reviews. They sounded like confessions. Asterisk. My son hasn't spoken since the accident. He built a character named Blue. Blue told me he misses his dad. Asterisk. I didn't know how to talk to my mom about the divorce, so I built a world where her voice was a forest, and mine was the rain. Asterisk. I made a story about my real self, the one I don't show anyone. And for the first time, I felt like I was allowed to exist. Every time we read one, we pinned it to the wall. By the end of the year, the wall had no space left. We started pinning them to the ceiling. That winter, I was asked to give a TED Talk. I stood in front of that glowing red dot, palms sweaty, voice steady, and said, "Some people use code to build apps. I used it to build a bridge between generations, between silences, between what we carry and what we finally say out loud." I told them about my parents, about Ivy, about Mrs. Lansbury, about the girl who started on DeviantArt with nothing but a cracked screen and a belief she wasn't supposed to have. I told them about the power of asterisk trying anyway. When I stepped off stage, I didn't cry. I felt too ready poor. That night I went home to a surprise. My parents were waiting. "Early birthday," my mom said, grinning. They handed me a box. Inside, a custom-bound hardcover book. The cover read, asterisk, The Art of Becoming, The Story of Callie Monroe, asterisk. Inside were prints of my work, from my very first sketch as a child, all the way to Ember. Quotes from my talks, photos from launches, even annotated commentary from my dad, who wrote little things like, asterisk, didn't understand this piece, still made me cry. My mom had even included the watercolors she'd been doing privately, birds, flowers, a very good attempt at Totoro. I flipped through the pages, speechless. "It's your story," she said, "and it's ours, too." I hugged them both. No bitterness, no apology. Just time, catching up to where love had finally arrived. In the months that followed, we launched a second round of Monroe Mirror Grants. Ivy sat on the selection panel this time. She'd shaved one side of her head and wore boots like armor now. She was terrifying and brilliant. I adored her. One day she knocked on my office door. "I want to show you something," she said. It was a prototype, a game she'd been working on quietly for a year. Her own. It was clunky, beautiful, raw, and it made me sob in the first 5 minutes. She called it *Shiverhaven. "Publish it," I said. "Under your name, no ghost credits, no hiding." She hesitated. "Are you sure?" I grinned. I've never been more sure. That same week, I stepped down as creative director of Monroe Inc. Not to disappear, but to evolve. Rachel became CEO. Danny took over as head of development. Ivy was hired full-time as our first junior lead. Me? I started something new. A tiny studio, no staff, no investors. Just me and my sketchpad. I called it Twin de Somlight *. Our mission? To make one game a year. Small, weird, honest. Art not for profit, but for presence. My first title was called Rest Mode Juck, a game about doing nothing on purpose. You play a tired creator. Your only task, to breathe, to walk slowly, to listen to wind and watch time pass. No boss battles. No achievements. Just grace. It wasn't a blockbuster. But it found its people. And that was enough. On the 5th anniversary of Ember, we hosted an international showcase. I stood on stage and looked out at a crowd of creators, educators, survivors, skeptics. And I said, this isn't about games. It's about mirrors. About giving someone the chance to look at their story and say, that was hard, but it was mine, and I made it. The crowd stood, applauded. I looked out and saw Ivy, Danny, Rachel, and my parents, holding hands. For a long moment I didn't speak. I just smiled. Because sometimes, that's how stories end. Not with revenge, not with regret, but with becoming, with a room full of light. And the quiet, steady knowing that your voice is no longer waiting to be heard. It twerpes the echo. Twerpes View More Great Stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.